We always talk about the NBA's biggest stars and the amazing plays we see on the court, right? Right.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about the system that brings all those players together in the first place?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's pretty crazy when you realize how many NBA players weren't even born in the U.S.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, their journey to the NBA starts with the draft.
It really shows you how global basketball has become.
Totally.
The draft is like this pipeline for talent from all over the world.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, just for you.
Yeah.
You sent us a ton of interesting articles and research about the NBA draft.
Yes, some great stuff in there.
So we're going to break it all down. We're going to look at why the draft even exists,
Right.
how it actually works, all the complicated parts, and whether it's really making the league more competitive.
I think we can definitely get a good understanding of the draft from these sources.
For sure.
Not just like the basics of what it is, but like why it works the way it does.
Yeah, the why is really important.
Totally.
Okay, so one of the big things we saw in the research was this idea of competitive balance.
Uh-huh.
It seems like the draft is all about stopping just a few teams from getting all the best young players every year.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I mean, and think about it.
Yeah.
Without the draft, the teams with the most money and the biggest fan bases, they just sign all the top prospects.
Right, because they could just offer them the most money.
Exactly. And the teams in smaller markets, they'd never be able to compete.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be fair.
The draft is supposed to even things out a bit.
So it's like they're intentionally spreading the talent around the league.
That's the idea.
So how does that actually work?
Well, the main way they do it is through the draft lottery.
Right.
So that's where the 14 teams that didn't make the playoffs get a chance to win the top picks.
Okay.
But it's not as simple as just giving the worst team the first pick.
Right. I know there's like a random drawing involved.
Yeah, exactly. They use these weighted probabilities.
Oh.
So the teams with the worst records have a better chance of getting a top pick.
Uh-huh.
But it's not guaranteed. Like the team with the worst record isn't automatically going to get the #1 pick.
Okay, so there's still that element of chance.
Exactly. They randomly draw numbers to decide the first 4 picks.
I see.
And that's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, why is that?
Because it's supposed to help stop teams from tanking.
Tanking?
You know when a team basically gives up on a season so they can get a better draft pick?
Oh, right, right.
If there's no guarantee that finishing last gets you the best player, then teams might try a little harder to win games.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so that's the lottery.
Okay.
Then for the rest of the picks, they just go in reverse order of the team's records.
Oh, so the worst teams still get to pick earlier,
Exactly.
but they might not get the very top pick.
Right.
Okay, so how much does this actually help those smaller market teams?
I think it's huge for them.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, it's tough for those teams to convince big-name free agents to sign with them.
Right, they might not want to live in a smaller city.
Exactly.
Or maybe they think the team won't be good enough to win a championship.
Yeah.
So the draft is kind of their best chance to get really good young players.
It's like their main way to build a competitive team.
So a good draft can really make a huge difference for those teams.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the league has all these rules, but how do they actually know if it's working?
Well, they track a bunch of different things.
Like what?
They look at which teams are making the playoffs each year.
Okay.
They see how often different teams win championships.
Mm-hmm.
And they also look at how many teams are having winning seasons and how many are stuck in losing streaks.
So it's not just about who wins the championship.
No, it's about making sure the entire league is competitive,
Right.
that there's parity across the league.
So does that mean it's working perfectly?
Well, that's where the debate comes in.
What do you mean?
It's tough to create perfect balance.
Yeah.
I mean, there are always going to be teams that are better than others.
Right. We've seen dynasties in the NBA.
Exactly.
So what are some of the things that make a team successful besides the draft?
Oh, there are a lot of factors.
Like what?
Well, the team's management has to be good.
Right. They have to make smart decisions
Exactly.
about trades and stuff like that.
Yeah. And they need good coaches who can develop the players.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it just comes down to luck, like whether players stay healthy.
Right, right.
So the draft is important, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about tanking.
Yeah.
And how the lottery was supposed to stop it.
Uh-huh.
Can we dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Like, when did they first introduce the lottery?
It was back in 1985.
Oh, wow.
And before that, they used to just flip a coin to decide who got the top pick.
Really?
Yeah. Between the two teams with the worst records, one from each conference. But that still meant teams had a reason to be the worst in their conference.
Right. So the lottery was meant to make things more fair,
Yeah,
to
exactly.
make it less likely that the worst team would automatically get the best pick.
And it was also to keep teams from just giving up on a season because it wouldn't guarantee them anything.
That makes sense.
And the lottery has changed a lot since then.
In what ways?
They've changed the odds for each team a few times.
Yeah, okay.
And they've also changed how many picks are decided by the lottery.
I see.
The most recent change was in 2019.
Yeah, I remember that.
They made it so the 3 worst teams all have the same chance of getting the #1 pick.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter if you're the absolute worst or just one of the worst.
So has that helped stop tanking?
It's hard to say for sure.
What do you mean?
Well, teams still want those high draft picks.
Especially if there's a really great player coming out of college.
Yeah, exactly.
So some teams might still think it's worth it to lose on purpose.
It's a tough problem to solve.
So what else are they doing about it?
Well, they've talked about a lot of different ideas.
Like what?
One idea is to have an auction for the draft picks.
An auction.
Yeah, teams would get draft points based on their record,
Okay.
and they could use those points to bid on different draft positions.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it would definitely be a big change.
So instead of just having a set draft order, they could actually buy their way into a better spot.
Exactly.
What else have they thought about?
Well, they've also talked about making rules that would stop a team from winning the lottery 2 years in a row.
Oh, that's interesting.
That way, the team couldn't just keep tanking and getting the best picks.
Right.
And there's been some discussion about changing the rules for traded draft picks, too.
Okay.
Sometimes teams trade away future draft picks.
Uh-huh.
And there are rules about how those picks are protected.
Protected.
Yeah, like if a team trades away a pick, it might have protections so they don't lose out too much.
Oh, I see.
But some people think those protections should be removed.
So that the team that gets the pick always gets it no matter what.
Exactly.
So the league is really trying to find the right balance
Yeah.
between giving bad teams a chance to get better,
Right.
but also stopping them from just giving up on trying to win.
It's a delicate balance.
Okay, so besides competitive balance, the draft is also how teams get new young players right.
Yeah. It's the main way they do it.
So who's actually eligible for the draft?
Well, if you're a U.S. player, you have to be at least 19 years old.
Okay.
And you have to be out of high school for at least 1 year.
Right.
That's why we have the one and done rule in college basketball.
Right.
Because players can't go straight to the NBA from high school anymore.
Okay, so what are teams looking for in these young players?
Well, they really want players with potential.
Potential.
Yeah, like maybe they're not superstars yet,
Uh-huh.
but they have these skills and athleticism to become great players.
So it's not just about how good they are right now.
No, it's about how good they could become in the future.
Right.
Teams are willing to take risks on players who might need some time to develop.
Especially if they see something special in them.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just draft talented players.
Right.
Teams also have to develop them.
Yeah, player development is so important.
What does that actually involve?
Well, teams have coaches who work specifically with young players.
Okay.
They have training programs, and they give players chances to play in games and practice.
Well,
It's all about helping them improve their skills.
so even a really talented player might not succeed if they're not on the right team.
Yeah, if they don't have the right support system.
Right.
Teams put a lot of effort into player development.
Because they know it can make a big difference.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's go back in time a bit.
Okay.
When did the NBA draft actually start?
The very first draft was in 1947.
Wow.
And back then, it was a lot different than it is now.
In what ways?
Well, it wasn't as organized, and teams didn't always have a fair chance to get the players they wanted.
Oh, I see.
So they created the draft to make things more structured and fair.
Right, so that every team had an equal chance to get good players.
Exactly.
And we've already talked about how they changed the draft to stop tanking.
Yeah,
Were there any other big changes over the years?
definitely.
Like what?
Well, they had to add rules about age and eligibility
Right.
because more and more young players were entering the draft.
Uh-huh.
They wanted to make sure players were ready for the NBA.
Right, because it's a big jump from college or high school.
Exactly.
And they also started including international players.
Yeah, that was a huge change.
Because it opened up the draft to a whole new pool of talent,
Exactly.
and it made the NBA even more global.
Definitely.
And they also shortened the draft.
Yeah, it used to be a lot longer. Sometimes it went for over 20 rounds,
Wow.
but now it's just 2 rounds.
Right.
That makes it a lot easier for teams to focus on the best players.
And for undrafted players to find teams.
Exactly.
So the draft has gone through a lot of changes.
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, to keep up with the times.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how the draft affects the league.
Yeah.
But what about the teams and players themselves?
Uh-huh.
What are some of the advantages of the draft for teams?
Well, it gives them a way to get young players that's fair and organized,
Okay.
and it helps them control their costs because there are rules about how much rookies can be paid.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it's supposed to help create more competitive balance.
Right. We've talked about that.
And draft picks are valuable.
In what way?
Teams can trade them to get other players.
Oh, right.
Or to get future draft picks.
Okay.
And if a team drafts well, it can really improve their reputation.
Yeah, people will see them as a smart organization.
Exactly.
So what are some of the downsides of the draft for teams?
Well, there's always the risk of drafting a bust.
A bust.
A player who doesn't live up to expectations.
Oh, right.
That can be a big setback for a team.
Yeah, especially if they use a high draft pick on that player.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
well,
then,
they don't always get to pick the player they want.
especially with the lottery.
Yeah, exactly.
And even if they draft a talented player, they still have to develop them. And
Yeah.
that takes time and effort.
And it's not always successful.
And if a team keeps making bad draft picks, it can hurt their reputation.
Definitely.
So what about the players?
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of the draft for them?
Well, for players, the draft is their ticket to the NBA.
It's how they get into the league.
And if they get drafted, they get a guaranteed contract,
Okay.
and they get to play against the best players in the world,
Mm.
and they get access to amazing coaching and facilities.
Right.
And they can make a lot of money from endorsements.
So it's a pretty amazing opportunity.
Yeah. It's a dream come true for a lot of players.
But there are some downsides too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Well, they don't get to choose which team they play for.
right.
So they might end up in a city they don't like,
Okay.
or on a team that doesn't fit their playing style.
And they might not get to play as much as they want.
Yeah, especially if they're on a team with a lot of other good players.
And there's always the chance that they'll get injured.
Right.
So it's a high risk, high reward situation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the NBA draft.
Yeah.
But how does it compare to other sports leagues?
That's a great question.
Like, what about the NFL?
The NFL also has a draft.
Uh-huh.
It's 7 rounds long,
Okay.
and the teams with the worst records get to pick first.
Just like in the NBA.
But they don't have a lottery.
So it's just based on their record?
Yeah.
And do the players make an impact right away?
Yeah, they usually do.
More so than in the NBA.
Yeah, I think so.
What about baseball?
Baseball has a really long draft.
Like, how long?
It's 20 rounds.
Wow.
And they just started using a lottery for the top 6 picks.
Oh, that's new.
Yeah.
And what about trading picks?
They don't trade picks as much as in the NBA.
Oh, interesting.
And the players take a lot longer to develop.
Because they have the minor leagues.
Exactly.
And what about hockey?
The NHL has a 7-round draft,
Okay.
and they use a lottery for the teams that didn't make the playoffs.
Oh.
Then the rest of the teams pick in reverse order of their record.
Okay.
They can trade draft picks, and they have some rules to prevent teams from tanking.
Oh, like what?
Well, a team can't move up too far in the draft, even if they win the lottery.
Okay.
And they can't win the lottery 2 years in a row.
I see. And what about soccer?
Well, European soccer doesn't have a draft at all.
Really?
Yeah, they have a different system.
So how do they get players?
They buy and sell players from other teams.
Oh, so it's more like free agency.
Yeah, kind.
And they also develop players in their own academies, so it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
And money plays a big role.
Yeah, the richest teams can buy the best players.
So it's really different from the North American draft system.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
What are some of the recent changes to the NBA draft?
Well, the biggest one was in 2019.
Right, they changed the lottery.
Yeah, they made it so the 3 worst teams all have the same chance at the #1 pick.
Okay.
And starting this year, the draft will be 2 nights long.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 1 night for the first round and 1 night for the second round.
Interesting.
It gives teams more time to make decisions.
Right, and to talk about trades and stuff.
Exactly.
So what about the future?
Well, there's still a lot of things they're discussing.
Like what?
They might change the lottery again.
Okay.
They might make it so all 14 lottery picks are random.
Oh, so there wouldn't be any weighted probabilities.
Yeah.
That would be a huge change.
Yeah, it would.
And they're still talking about ways to stop teams from winning the lottery 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And they might change the rules for traded picks
Right.
to make them less protected.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the draft is always evolving.
Yeah.
The NBA is always looking for ways to make it better.
Definitely.
So to wrap things up,
Yeah.
the NBA draft is more than just about picking players.
Right.
It's about creating a fair and competitive league. It's about giving every team a chance to succeed.
And it's the main way for young players to achieve their NBA dream.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how this one event each year can have such a huge impact on the entire league.
For sure.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of how NBA teams are built.
Yeah. And the challenges the league faces in trying to make things fair for everyone.
Exactly.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
How can the league help struggling teams without encouraging them to lose on purpose?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And as basketball becomes more and more global,
Right.
do you think the draft will change even more in the future?
It'll be interesting to see what happens.